there's a painting hanging on the wall here in your
yes.
studio, and we're doing a podcast, semi-started. Would you describe what's happening in the painting for our listeners?
Sure.
What it looks
I'm trying to
like,
look
and
at it. Well, it's the very early stages of a painting.
Mhm.
So this is like an afternoon of work going into a painting, and the way that I start my work. So they're always, if you're not familiar with the paintings, they tend to have the figure, sometimes multiple figures, sometimes sort of a single figure moving through the time and space of the canvas. And there's oftentimes, I would say there's more these sort of fragmented parts of the body that coalesce into figures, but there's oftentimes the amount of hands or feet or arms don't really add up to a discernible number of figures. So, and then there tends to be either like a still life element or a patterned plane or an architectural reference that contextualizes, but then also fragments the figures within the piece. And they are always acrylic paint on raw canvas ground. So that's sort of the, the umbrella story of them. But what's happening in this piece right now, in its very early stages, I will start off with a raw canvas and sort of no predetermined sketches or ideas of what I'm going to paint in the piece, kind of knowing it's going to roughly take the form of what I just described.
Mhm.
And it starts off very, I approach it much more abstractly. It's much more through physical brushstrokes and sort of the memory of drawing the figure, because I'll still take figure drawing classes. But I'll try to resist the urge of completing the image that I will start off painting. So I'll leave it really fragmented and spend a lot of time looking at the work, because I tend to have a pretty quick hand. So I'll slow down my
Mhm.
process by looking at the work and thinking about different ways that I could connect these initial strokes. And so it's sort of, I will often say that it's sort of like looking at clouds in the sky and
Mhm.
trying to like find images in the clouds. So I'll do that with my own work when I look at it, just as a way to sort of challenge myself to do a different composition or have the figure connect in a way that I wouldn't have done if I had just been doing all my thinking through making. And so from there, pretty quickly, though, the figures do start to get worked out. So right now on this piece, there's like, what did I say there is? There's definitely like 2 nipples and like starting to be the formation of 4 different hands, no 5 hands actually. And there's 3 faces, but only one of them is really made with a high contrast use of paint. So that's the one that's kind of coming across. But I know that
With the
there's a
blue.
paint to,
Yeah,
there's like a
with the
blue sort of
nose.
profile.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to the right of that face, there is a very vague face that's
With
on
the
there.
yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's some sort of like fleshy thighs and this little kind of, it's either sort of like a cold sun or a
Yeah.
bright moon in the background. So it's this very sort of, I always do sort of, even though the works are not meant to be narrative, I will narrate what I'm looking at to myself as I paint it. So at this stage, this very early stage, I've sort of started to narrate this as being like a very heroic sort of
Mhm.
image, because there's this sort of like,
It does feel like that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
even like, and I'll write down notes to myself as I make the painting that will sometimes go into the titles. And I always look for sort of like puns or jokes or
Mhm.
so actually all my notes, I started making this painting I have an upper barn on this
Mhm.
property, so I started painting it up there, and then it got too cold and rainy, so I brought it down here. So like the notes I have are like westward ho, but like ho is being like
HOE.
like
Yeah.
a hoe.
Yeah.
And just kind of like making little jokes. I tend to keep those sort of dumb jokes in my drawings, but with the paintings I kind of work through just how
Yeah.
kind of silly I'll be with the titles. But
Well, it's interesting because like as I was looking at it, and currently there's a lot of white space, which is oftentimes, a significant element of your
Mhm.
compositions also.
Yeah.
And in this work, when I was looking at it, I currently see, and I know it's evolving, but a heroic female figure, and I was thinking about like a winged victory,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah,
because it
exactly.
seems like she has a lot of motion, and it's
Mhm.
almost as if maybe because of the angles of where it is currently, it almost seems as if she's like has a lot of forward momentum and almost like
Mhm.
she could be sort of taking off,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's one of the helpful things of not having a sketch going into a painting. Like some people are like, "Oh, aren't you intimidated by having a raw canvas?" I'm like, "Oh no, it's great because I can't like you can't mess up when you start because
right?
you're not trying to make it look like anything.
Yeah,
You're just really reacting to what happens and then finding the opportunities to flesh out things that are interesting. So I do spend like a lot of, and one of the reasons why I'm happy about being in this very tiny studio,
yeah,
my old studio, which I still have, is like I don't know 5 times the size of this. So one of the things I'm excited about working from home again and working in the smaller space is being able to really do some extended periods of looking at work throughout the
hmm
day rather than having it be like, well, I drove to the studio and so I better put in like 8 hours right now. Um, and this will allows me to really just sort of look at the work and narrate it. But I mean, I'll take opportunities that start to develop through the piece developing to then emphasize that in the patterns and the planes, which always come later. So that'll be like probably a little bit longer of working on this. I'll photograph it and bring it into the computer and play on Illustrator with the different planes and still life possibilities. And that's a way of continuing to have that sort of free play with the composition, but not actually lay down paint so I can still have those areas of raw canvas.
yeah.
But yeah, since there is sort of this like heroic pose beginning, I'll
hmm hmm
probably either rein that in or really go all the way into it.
Yeah.
So